Ruby woke up on Monday morning and looked at the toothbrush for a long time, not with the ambivalence of the previous 3 weeks, with something cleaner than ambivalence, the kind of clarity that arrives after you have said a true thing out loud, or in her case, sent it in 4 words to a man who responded with the same 4 words twice, and the saying of it has reorganized the landscape slightly, so that what was previously uncertain now simply exists as what it is. The toothbrush was on the left side of the holder. It belonged to someone who came on Fridays and whose daughter had opinions about cushion firmness, and who said things that landed in places Ruby had not known were available, and who had, apparently, known about the toothbrush and said nothing for 3 weeks with the particular patience of a man who understood that Ruby would arrive at things in her own time, and that arriving in your own time was not the same as not arriving. She got in the shower, got dressed, made coffee, opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote not a line but a paragraph, which was unusual, the words coming faster than she normally allowed them to. And when she finished, she read it back once and then closed the notebook without editing it because some things needed to exist in their first form before they became considered. She picked up her phone, called Jae-hoon. He answered on the second ring. His voice had the slightly rough quality of early morning that she had catalogued across 38 seconds of a voice note, and which now, coming through the phone directly, felt different in a way she was not going to overthink. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said, a pause, the comfortable kind. "Toothbrush," she said. "Yes, I want you to know that I know it's there, and I know that you know it's there, and I know that you know that I know." She paused. "And I need you to know that I am not moving it." Silence on the line, then quietly, "Okay, that's all I wanted to say, Ruby." "I know." And he said it once this time, which was different from the text. Once was not confirmation or emphasis. Once was simply the word landing in its right place, solid and present and requiring nothing additional. She smiled at the kitchen window. "I'll see you Friday," she said. "Friday," he said. She hung up. Stood in her kitchen with the coffee and the city coming up outside and the specific feeling of a woman who has stopped standing at the edge of something and taken a single step forward. Not a leap, not a declaration, one deliberate step, which was the only kind she knew how to take and the only kind she trusted. She picked up her bag, went to Bridges, unlocked the door, turned on the lights. Stood in the yellow room in the Monday morning quiet before De-young arrived at his customary 8 minutes early and looked at what she had built. The books and the cushions and the bilingual labels and the drawings on the walls and the second shelf the library had colonized, and felt it fully, the whole weight and warmth of it, without deflecting into the next thing or the future thing or the thing that needed doing. Just this, just here, just now. The door opened 8 minutes before the session was scheduled to begin. "Good morning," De-young said, in English, because it was Monday. "Good morning," Ruby said. "Shoes off, please." He removed his shoes with the focused seriousness he applied to all procedural matters and walked past her in his socks to his preferred table and opened his bag and took out his workbook, and Ruby watched him and felt the particular fullness of a life that was not what she had designed, but was entirely what she had built and understood. On this Monday morning in February, with the snow still on the ground outside and the toothbrush on the left side at home, that there was no meaningful difference between those two things anymore. The week happened the way weeks do when something has shifted, not dramatically differently. The schedule was the same. The students came and went. The administrative emails accumulated and were answered. Ifunanya posted 3 more videos, 2 of them polished, and one of them raw in the way the 43 seconds had been raw. Shorter this time, 28 seconds, filmed in the subway on a Wednesday evening with the city moving past the window behind her and her face doing the thing it did when she was thinking rather than presenting. The 28 seconds got 200,000 views in 6 hours. She called Marie from the subway platform afterward, still holding her phone from the filming, and said simply, "It's working." "I know," Marie said. "The real ones work better than the produced ones. Ruby told you that 3 years ago." "Ruby tells us things before we're ready to hear them," Ifunanya said. "That's her specific gift and her most annoying quality simultaneously." Marie laughed. The clean laugh, the one she had been laughing more frequently since Thursday's coffee, since the full stop instead of the comma. "How are you feeling about the loneliness thing?" Ifunanya stood on the subway platform in the February cold and thought about it honestly. "Like I named it so it can't ambush me anymore," she said. "It's still there, but it's sitting in a labeled container now instead of leaking into everything." "Is that better?" "Significantly better," Ifunanya said. "Labeled containers are my primary coping mechanism. Mine is numbers," Marie said. "I did the math on the Juncio situation approximately 40 times before I was ready to have the coffee. The numbers help. The numbers told me I could afford to lose the security and survive. That's what I needed to know before I could access the rest of the decision." "What was the rest of the decision?" "That I didn't want him. That I hadn't wanted him for a long time. That what I wanted was the feeling of having decided correctly, and you can't get that from a relationship you're staying in out of habit." She paused. "The numbers got me to the door. The honesty walked me through it." Ifunanya was quiet for a moment. "Marie." "Yes, Daniel." A pause longer than the previous ones. "What about Daniel?" "He's been filming the platform for 2 months. He's documenting the growth of a creative business. That's professional, Marie." "Ifunanya." "He looks at you." "People look at people." "Looks at you the way Jaehoon looks at Ruby, a beat. Which is to say, like you are the most interesting thing in any room he is currently in, and he is trying very hard to be professional about it." Silence. "He's financially unstable," Marie said. "You just finished telling me that the numbers get you to the door and the honesty walks you through." More silence. "I hate when my own logic gets used against me," Marie said. "I know. It's one of my gifts." The subway arrived with its particular rush of warm air and noise. "Think about it. That's all. Just think about it." "I'm thinking about it," Marie said, and her voice had a quality that suggested she had been thinking about it for considerably longer than the conversation implied, and had simply been waiting for someone to name it so she could stop pretending she hadn't been. Joan's week contained a Tuesday evening that she would return to for a long time afterward. She had come home from work to find Taehyun not in the kitchen at his usual evening station, but in the second bedroom, sitting on the floor with the box open beside him, adding something to it. He heard her come in and looked up without embarrassment, the ease of a man who had decided that the things he did for his marriage did not require explanation or concealment. "What are you adding?" she asked from the doorway. He held it up. A small folded piece of paper. She crossed the room and sat on the floor beside him, which was not a thing she had done in the second bedroom before, and took the paper and unfolded it. It was a list. His handwriting. Korean on the left side, English on the right, which was the format of his private notes when he was working through something he wanted to be precise about. The list was titled, in both languages, "Things I Have Learned About Joan This Year." She read it. It was not long. 8 items. But each item had the quality of careful observation rather than summary. The kind of thing you notice about a person when you are paying attention, not to the version they present, but to the version that moves through ordinary days when the presentation is resting. Number 3 was, she becomes more herself in kitchens than anywhere else. Number 6 was, when she is processing something difficult, she goes quiet first and then comes out the other side of the quiet with the thing she actually thinks rather than the thing she initially thought. Number 7 was, she has never once in our marriage asked me for something she did not actually want, which means every request she makes matters completely, and I must not treat any of them as small. She read number 7 twice. She looked at him. He was watching her with the steady warmth that she had been slowly learning was not the whole of him, but was the surface through which everything else moved, the carrier frequency, and she had been so busy reading the surface that she had missed for a long time how much signal it was carrying. "Taehyun," she said. "Yes." "The second bedroom." He was still. "Been thinking," she said carefully, "about what I actually want, not what I'm afraid of wanting, not what your mother wants. Not what I think I should want or what seems reasonable or what fits inside the life we've built so far." She paused. "What I actually want." "What do you actually want?" he asked, quietly, without loading the question. "I want to find out," she said. "I want to stop treating the question like a threat and start treating it like an actual question." She looked at the notebook in the box, the one that said for when we know what to put in it. "I'm not ready to fill the notebook yet. But I think I'm ready to open it." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's enough," he said. "That's more than enough." She leaned against him on the floor of the second bedroom with the box between them and the city doing its Tuesday outside, and the quiet of the apartment which she had once confused with absence and which she now understood was simply the sound of a home in which two people trusted the silence because they had earned it. "Number 7, she said. "Yes, on the list. Every request matters and must not be treated as small." She paused. "I need you to apply that retroactively to the filing cabinet." He was quiet for a moment. "Filing cabinet stays in the second bedroom," he said, "indefinitely." "Indefinitely," he agreed. She felt him smile against the top of her head. She did not see it, but she felt it, and that, she thought, was its own kind of answer. The following Sunday dinner did not happen, not because anyone decided not to have it. Because life, which had been building itself around the Sunday dinners with cooperative patience, finally asserted the weight of its other demands in the specific way that adult life eventually does, not dramatically, through 4 separate complications that arrived independently and accumulated into an absence. Marie had a deadline. A real one, the platform's first partnership proposal, which she and Ifunanya had been developing for 3 weeks, and which needed to be submitted by Monday morning and which was not finished. Joan had Taehyun's family dinner, a quarterly gathering that had been scheduled before the Sunday dinner, and which she had initially planned to leave early from and then, on consideration, decided to stay for fully, the first time she had made that choice without managing her exit in advance. Ifunanya had a creator event, an invitation she had almost declined and then accepted because Ruby had told her that the platform being in a room with other platforms was not performance, it was infrastructure, and Ruby's logic was, as previously established, difficult to argue with. And Ruby had Jaehoon, not an event or a deadline. Jaehoon and Suah coming over for dinner, which had been arranged on Friday at pickup with the casual simplicity of people for whom this kind of arrangement had become natural, which was itself a piece of information about where things had arrived. She cooked. Not elaborately, the way she might have 3 months ago if she were managing an impression, but the food she actually made when she was feeding people she wanted to feed. Rice and a stew she had learned from her mother with modifications she had developed herself over years of Seoul kitchens, the recipe that was half inheritance and half invention. Suah arrived with a drawing she had made specifically for the occasion. Ruby received it with appropriate gravity. It was a drawing of 3 people. A tall one, a medium one, and a small one, standing in front of a yellow rectangle which was clearly Bridges because it had a sign on it that said BRIGES in large letters, the spelling approximate but the intention precise. "Spelling," Ruby said. "It's art," Suah said. "Spelling is for school." Jaehoon made a sound that was somewhere between a cough and a laugh. They ate dinner at Ruby's small table, the 3 of them, in the apartment that had belonged to Ruby alone for 3 years, and which felt, on this Sunday evening, neither crowded nor invaded but simply inhabited in a way it had not quite been before, the specific quality of a space that is exactly the right size for the people currently inside it. Suah fell asleep on the couch after dinner with the decisive suddenness of children, who transition directly from fully awake to completely unconscious, without the intermediate negotiations that adults require. Ruby put a blanket over her and stood looking at her for a moment in the lamp light, at this small person who had walked into Bridges and declared the yellow walls a lot and stayed anyway, who had taken Ruby's hand at a venue walkthrough as though it were obvious, who had asked her father over breakfast whether Bridges lived inside Ruby and had received, apparently, a satisfactory answer. Jaehoon was washing the dishes. She had not asked him to. He had simply done it in the way he did things, without announcement, with the quiet ease of someone who was comfortable enough in a space to contribute to it naturally. She stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him. He was wearing a gray sweater and moving through her kitchen with a familiarity that was new enough to notice and natural enough not to be strange, and she thought about what Joan had said at Sunday dinner. Not this Sunday, the previous one, about the box and the notebook, and arriving at a person you have not finished meeting. She thought she understood that now. She thought she had been meeting Jae-hoon for 8 months and had not yet reached the end of what there was to find, and that this was not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be lived inside, which was a different relationship with the unknown than the one she had arrived in Seoul with 3 years ago. He turned and found her in the doorway. They looked at each other in the quiet of the apartment with Sua asleep on the couch and the dishes done, and the small table with its 3 dinner plates cleared, and the city outside doing its Sunday in the snow. And Ruby thought about the notebook entry she had written on Monday morning, the one she had not edited, the one in its first form. She had written, "I think the life I planned was a door, and the life I am living is the room behind it. I kept looking at the door because I built it and it was mine, and I was proud of it. But I have been inside the room for some time now, and it is warmer than the door and larger than I expected, and there are people in it who chose to be in it, and I think I have been standing with my back to all of it because I was afraid that if I turned around and saw it clearly I would have to admit that I did not build it alone." She had not edited it. She had not needed to. "Ruby," Jae-hoon said. "Yes." He looked at her with the expression she had accumulated over 8 months of Fridays, the one she had described in her notebook as the look of a man who has decided something and is patient about the timing. "I want to ask you something. Okay? Tonight? Not right now, but soon." He held her gaze. "When Sua isn't asleep on your couch and you haven't just cooked dinner and the timing isn't complicated by other things." He paused. "I want to ask you something properly." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay, you'll let me ask. Okay, I'll let you ask." She paused. "And Jae-hoon, I already know what I'm going to say." Kitchen was very quiet outside. Seoul held its snow and its Sunday and its enormous indifferent continuous life. Inside, in a small apartment with yellow walls described in a child's drawing and a toothbrush on the left side of the holder and a notebook entry in its first unedited form, something completed itself. Not with a declaration, not with a scene, with the quiet certainty of 2 people who have been moving toward each other at the correct pace and have arrived, without drama, at the same place at the same time. Jae-hoon smiled. The full version. The one that reorganized his face. Ruby smiled back. Sua slept on, unbothered, having apparently decided some time ago how this was going to go, and having been content to wait for the adults to arrive at the same conclusion. The group chat came alive at 11 that night. 4 separate messages arriving within 3 minutes of each other, the particular synchronicity of women who had spent their Sundays in different places and were now returning, separately and simultaneously, to the fixed point. Ifunanya sent. The creator event was full of people performing. "I was the only one who talked about something real. 3 people cried. I think I found my people." Marie replied, "I stayed at the family dinner until the end." Daniel was there. He looked at me the way Ifunanya described. I looked back. "That's all I'm saying." Joan sent. "We opened the notebook. We didn't write anything in it yet, but we opened it." Also, Taehyun's aunt told me my jollof was better than anything she had ever made and then asked for the recipe, which I think is the Korean family equivalent of a formal acceptance. Ruby wrote, "Jae-hoon is going to ask me something. I already know what I'm going to say. The toothbrush stays." 4 messages, 4 women. 4 Sundays that had happened separately and were now, in the group chat at 11 on a Sunday night, becoming one Sunday the way they always eventually did. The separate threads finding their way back to each other because that was what they did, what they had always done, what they would keep doing. Ifunanya replied to Ruby's message with a single word, "Finally." Marie sent a voice note that was 12 seconds of her laughing. Joan sent a photograph. Her and Taehyun on the floor of the second bedroom with the open notebook between them, her head on his shoulder, both of them looking at the camera with the expression of people who have just done something that costs something and are not sorry. Ruby looked at all of it. At the group chat that had been running for 3 years, that had contained Sunday dinner logistics and 3 in the morning crises and terrible jokes, and the small daily dispatches of 4 lives being lived in a city that had tested each of them differently and taught them, in their different ways, the same thing. That you do not collect a life. You build it, in the spaces between plans. In the ordinary Sundays. In the conversations that happen on kitchen floors and subway platforms and across small round tables. In the things you say when you stop managing how they land. In the people you let into the rooms you have built until the rooms become theirs too, and the building was never as solitary as it seemed. She put her phone down. Jae-hoon was in the living room checking on Soo-ah. The proposal arrived on a Tuesday in a white envelope with the company's logo embossed in the corner, which Ruby noticed because embossed logos on physical envelopes in an era of digital everything were a deliberate choice. The specific language of institutions that wanted you to feel the weight of their interest before you had read a single word of it. She opened it at her desk after the last student left. She read it once quickly, then again slowly. Then a third time with the particular attention she gave to documents that were trying to tell her something different from what they were saying. The Korea Future Learning Initiative was the company's name. She knew them. Everyone in Seoul's education sector knew them. 14 campuses across the country, a government partnership, a curriculum that had produced measurable outcomes in bilingual development across 3 consecutive years of independent assessment. They were legitimate. They were serious. They were the kind of institution that, when it put its name on something, that something became larger than it had been. The proposal was 61 pages. She read all 61. By the time she finished, the light outside had changed from afternoon to evening, and she had made 3 cups of tea, and drunk none of them, and filled 4 pages of her notebook with observations that were not quite notes and not quite feelings, but the territory between the two where her mind went when it was processing something it was not yet ready to name. The offer was significant. Financially, structurally, in terms of reach and resource and the kind of institutional credibility that took individual operators decades to accumulate independently. They wanted to expand Bridges into 5 locations across Seoul within 18 months. They wanted her curriculum, her methodology, her name, her face on the materials. They wanted 60% ownership. They wanted the right to rebrand. She closed the proposal, sat in the empty classroom, looked at the yellow walls. She thought about the paint, the specific yellow, the one she had taken 3 weeks to find, driving to 4 different suppliers until she found the shade that matched the memory she was trying to honor. The shade of her grandmother's classroom in Enugu, where a woman who had loved her without conditions had made a room that felt like permission. Permission to be curious, permission to be slow, permission to not know yet. She had brought that shade to Seoul and put it on these walls, and everything that had grown inside them had grown in that specific light. The proposal said the rebranding would involve the company's visual identity guidelines. The company's visual identity was navy blue and white. She looked at the yellow walls for a long time. Then she closed her notebook, turned off the lights, locked the door, walked home through the February cold and said nothing to anyone, and went to bed and lay in the dark, with the proposal sitting on her desk at Bridges and the toothbrush on the left side of the holder, and the notebook entry she had written on Monday that she had not edited, and she thought about all of it together, the totality of it, the specific question that the proposal was asking her underneath the 61 pages of professional language. Who does this belong to? She did not answer it that night. She did not answer it the next day either, or the day after that. And by the 4th day she had developed the specific quality of someone carrying something in a hidden pocket, the slight alteration of movement, the barely perceptible weight of a thing being managed rather than resolved. She taught her classes. She rearranged the reading rug. She answered emails about the waiting list. She had coffee with Jae-hoon on Thursday, their Thursday coffee which had become a standing thing without being formally established. And she sat across from him in the small place in Mappo and talked about Soo-ah's progress and the new bilingual reader she had ordered and the parent who had asked about extending the Friday session to include a Saturday morning option. And she did not mention the proposal. He asked how she was. She said fine. He looked at her with the expression that meant he was receiving information she had not spoken and was deciding what to do with it. He said okay. She finished her coffee, walked back to Bridges, stood at the door before unlocking it and put her hand flat against the frame for a moment, the painted wood under her palm, and felt the particular ache of someone who is about to make a decision they already know and are not yet ready to make out loud. She went inside, taught the afternoon session, went home. Did not call anyone. Marie found out about Daniel's footage on a Wednesday. She had gone to the platform's workspace, the small office she and Ifunanya rented in Hongdae that smelled like strong coffee, and the particular productive chaos of two women building something together, to review the content calendar for March. Daniel was there, which was not unusual. He had been documenting the platform's growth for 2 months with the unobtrusive presence of someone who understood that the best footage came from rooms that had forgotten they were being filmed. He was at his editing station when she arrived. He looked up. Hey, she said. She hung her coat, sat at her desk, opened her laptop. They worked in comfortable parallel silence for 40 minutes, the kind that had developed between them without discussion, the silence of two people who had discovered that they did not need to fill each other's quiet. Then he said, "Can I show you something?" She looked over. "What?" "Something I've been working on." He turned his monitor toward her. "It's not for the platform, it's not for anything, He stopped. "I want you to see it." She crossed the office and stood behind him. He pressed play. The footage was from the platform's workspace. Shot across 3 weeks, she recognized the dates from the background details, her coat on different hooks, the content calendar on the wall cycling through its iterations. It was her, unaware, working, not performing for the platform, not performing for anyone, just Marie at her desk doing the work. She watched herself lean into a spreadsheet with the focused intensity she brought to numbers, the slight forward tilt, the pen moving unconsciously against her notebook in the margin notes habit she had developed in university and never lost. She watched herself laugh at something on her screen, a real laugh, the kind she did not produce for cameras. She watched herself stand at the window during a phone call, not the content calendar call, something personal, and the expression on her face during that call had a quality that made her breath catch slightly because she had not known she looked like that when she thought no one was watching. She looked, in Daniel's footage, like a woman who was entirely and completely herself, unmanaged, unedited, real. 2 minutes and 40 seconds, he stopped the playback. The office was very quiet. "Why?" she said. He turned in his chair, looked up at her. He was not performing casualness, which was the thing about Daniel that was most consistently disorienting. He never performed anything. He simply was whatever he was in a given moment and said whatever that required. "Because I've been in a lot of rooms with a lot of people," he said. "And most people, when they know there's a camera somewhere, adjust. Even slightly. Even unconsciously." He paused. "You adjust for the platform camera. You have a platform version of yourself that is genuine but calibrated." He held her gaze. "But in these 2 minutes and 40 seconds you are not calibrated for anything. You are just—" He stopped, started again. "You are just exactly who you are. And I have been sitting on this footage for 3 weeks trying to figure out what to do with it because it felt too important to use for the platform and too important not to show you." Marie stood very still. "You filmed me without telling me," she said. "Yes." No deflection, no qualification. "That was wrong. I should have asked. I'm telling you now and showing you now because you deserve to know it exists and to decide what happens to it." She looked at the paused frame on his monitor. Her own face mid-laugh at something on a screen, entirely unaware. "What did you feel?" she said. "When you watched it?" He did not look away. "Like I was watching someone be free," he said quietly. "And like I wanted to tell her that she could be that in every room, not just the ones where she forgot about the camera." Office held the weight of that. Marie looked at the screen, at herself, at the woman in the footage who moved through her work with a directness and a naturalness that she recognized as herself and had not known was visible to anyone else. She felt something crack open that was not painful, the specific crack of something that has been held too carefully for too long and is finally being set down. "I'm terrified," she said. "I know," he said. "Of you?" She paused. "Of being seen like this, exactly like this, without the parts I choose." "I know," he said again. "Daniel. If you ever film me without asking again," she said, and her voice was steady and clear, "I will end the professional arrangement immediately and without discussion." "Understood," he said, completely, without defensiveness. And she said, and something shifted in her voice, the controlled part making room for the part underneath it, "I need you to send me that footage." He looked at her. "For the platform," she said. "For me." A pause. "I want to watch it when I start managing myself back into something smaller than I actually am. I want to be able to show myself what I look like when I forget to be careful." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he turned back to his monitor and sent the file to her email without saying anything else, because he understood, which was the thing about him that was most consistently true, exactly when words were required, and when the absence of them was the more precise language. Her email notification arrived. She went back to her desk, opened the file, watched herself laugh at something on a screen for 30 seconds, closed the laptop, sat in the Hongdae office with the strong coffee smell and the content calendar on the wall and the particular feeling of a woman who has just been shown something true about herself by someone who had no agenda attached to the showing. She picked up her phone, did not call anyone, sat with it. The way she had learned, slowly and at some cost, to sit with the things that mattered before she distributed them. Joan took the call in the kitchen. Hyun was in the study. She could hear the low sound of his work call through the wall, the measured cadence of his professional voice, and she stood at the kitchen counter with her own phone and looked at the name on the screen and breathed once before answering. "Madam Park." Hyun quote's mother. "Hello," Joan said, in Korean. She had been speaking more Korean with Hyun's family since the Tuesday on the second bedroom floor, a small deliberate choice, the decision to stop letting language be the distance between her and the life she was building. Madam Park responded warmly, which was always the quality of her calls, warmth as the carrier frequency of everything else. She asked about Joan's week. Joan answered. She asked about Hyun. Joan answered. The conversation moved through its preliminary rounds with the practiced ease of a relationship that had been developing its own language for 2 years. And then Madam Park said, in Korean carefully, "I want to speak to you about something I have been thinking about for some time." Joan set her free hand flat on the counter. "Okay. I know I have put pressure on you," Madam Park said. "About children, about the timeline, about," a pause, "about things that were not mine to put pressure about." Joan said nothing. "Want you to understand where it came from," Madam Park continued. "Not to excuse it, to explain it." Another pause, longer. "When Hyun was young, I was afraid. His father and I had difficulty, years of difficulty, and I watched him become a quiet child, and I told myself that what a quiet child needed was a full house, a loud house. I decided that for him before he was old enough to decide for himself." Her voice had a quality Joan had not heard in it before. Something underneath the warmth, something older. "I have been doing the same thing to your marriage that I did to his childhood, deciding what fullness looks like before you have had the chance to find it yourselves." Kitchen was very quiet. Joan's hand was still flat on the counter. "Madam Park," she said. "I am sorry," Hyun's mother said, simply, without ornamentation. The apology of someone who had thought about it long enough to deliver it cleanly. Joan closed her eyes. She thought about every family gathering, every question asked with warmth that was genuine and pressure that was real. Every time she had laughed it off publicly and absorbed it privately, and added it to the accumulation that had almost made her confuse the not yet of her own uncertainty with the never of someone else's expectation. She thought about the list Hyun had written. Number 7. Every request she makes matters completely and must not be treated as small. She thought about the notebook, open on the second bedroom floor, not yet written in. She opened her eyes. "Thank you," she said, in Korean, carefully and completely, "for saying that to me directly." A pause on the line. "You are good for my son," Madam Park said. "Not because of what you will give him, because of who you make him want to be." A beat. "I see that now. I should have seen it sooner." Joan pressed her lips together. "I would like," Madam Park said, with the particular delicacy of a woman choosing her words with full awareness of their weight, "to start again, if you are willing." Joan stood in her kitchen on a Wednesday evening in Seoul and felt the specific complexity of a moment that was simultaneously a relief and a grief, the relief of something releasing and the grief of what it had cost before it did. "Willing," she said. They talked for another 20 minutes. Not about children, not about timelines. About Joan's work, which Madame Park asked about with genuine curiosity for the first time. About a restaurant in Insadong that they had both been to separately and had not known. About small things that were not small. When she hung up, Joan stood in the kitchen for a long time. Hyun came in to refill his water glass. He looked at her face. "What happened?" "Your mother called." He went still. "She apologized," Joan said. "Properly." He set the glass down, said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "She told me she was going to." Joan looked at him. "You knew?" "I asked her to," he said, 3 weeks ago, after the second bedroom floor." He held her gaze. "Number 7, he said simply. She stared at him. This man she had chosen for his calm and discovered had depth she had not finished finding. This man who kept receipts and dried flowers and wrote lists and called his mother, and asked her to apologize to his wife because every request Joan made mattered completely and must not be treated as small. She crossed the kitchen and put her arms around him, and he held her in the way he had learned to hold her completely, without managing the duration of it. "I need to tell you something," she said into his shoulder. "Tell me." "I downloaded a cycle tracking app 4 weeks ago." He was still. "I haven't decided anything," she said, "but I downloaded it, which means something." She pulled back and looked at him. "I wanted you to know, not because I'm ready, because you deserve to know where I am." He looked at her with the expression from the list, the one she had not known he had, the one that said she was the most important information in any room. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "Number 7, she said. "Number 7, he agreed. They stood in the kitchen in the quiet of a Wednesday evening, and something that had been learning how to be real between them continued, without announcement, to become more so. Ifunanya arrived at the panel 20 minutes early, not because she was nervous, because she had learned, through 2 years of performing the wrong version of herself in public spaces, that arriving early to something that mattered gave you time to locate yourself accurately inside it before the room filled up with other people's energy, and you had to work harder to stay centered in your own. The venue was a creative space in Sinchon, the kind that had exposed brick and pendant lighting, and the specific aesthetic of places that wanted to signal that serious things happened inside them without being too serious about signaling it. 40 chairs arranged in a shallow arc facing a low stage with 3 seats and a moderator's table. A camera crew from a digital media outlet that covered the creator economy. A small brand partnership display near the entrance that Ifunanya walked past without looking at too directly, because the brand was one that had approached the platform about the interracial couple fantasy content, and whose logo she was not yet ready to make eye contact with. The other 2 panelists arrived together. She recognized them both. A Korean-American food blogger who had built a following on cultural fusion content, and whose work Ifunanya genuinely respected. A Korean lifestyle creator whose numbers were larger than anyone else's in the room, and whose content was beautiful and polished, and which Ifunanya, since the 43 seconds, had stopped being able to watch without noticing the distance between the beautiful surface and whatever was underneath it. They introduced themselves, exchanged the professional warmth of people who existed in adjacent spaces, and had mutual respect without yet having the trust that produced real conversation. The audience filled in. Ifunanya watched them from her seat on the stage. Mostly women, mostly in their mid-20s to mid-30s. The specific demographic of people who had found something in the platform's content that they recognized, who had watched 43 seconds of a kitchen floor and 2 minutes and 28 seconds of a subway window, and had come to a panel because they wanted to be in the same room as the person who had said the true thing. She felt the weight of that, not as pressure. As responsibility, the moderator opened the panel with the standard questions: origin stories, the decision to create publicly, the challenges of building an audience from scratch. The other 2 panelists answered with the fluency of people who had told their origin stories many times and had developed the version that was true and also well-shaped, the story with its rough edges worn smooth by repetition. Ifunanya answered differently, not dramatically, just without the smoothing. She said she had started creating because she was living a beautiful life that was also a lie, and the dissonance had become unbearable, and the camera had been the first place she tried to resolve it. She said it the way she would say it to Ruby over Sunday dinner, plainly, with no performance of vulnerability, just the information. The room shifted, not obviously. The way rooms shift when something real has been introduced into a space that was operating on the frequency of the managed and the professional and has suddenly received a different signal. The moderator moved through the prepared questions. Growth strategy, monetization, collaboration frameworks. Ifunanya answered all of them honestly and with the specific intelligence she brought to things she had actually thought about. Not performed intelligence, but the real kind. The kind that arrives from sitting with something until you understand it from the inside. She was 40 minutes into the panel when the question came. It came from the audience. A woman in the third row, early 30s, the kind of face that had clearly been composing a question for some time and had reached the point of commitment. "I want to ask Ifunanya something," she said, and the moderator nodded and turned to her. The woman looked at Ifunanya directly. "Your platform grew significantly when you were in a relationship with Kang Minwoo. A lot of people found you through that content. And since the relationship ended, you've shifted completely away from that era and those videos." But she paused, gathering herself. "There are still millions of views on that content. People are still watching it. And people who are newly discovering you are watching it as context for who you currently are." She paused again. "My question is, how do you feel about the fact that a version of yourself that you have publicly indicated was not authentic is still the version that most people meet first when they find you?" The room went very quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture. Ifunanya looked at the woman for a moment, at this stranger who had arrived at a panel, and asked, with complete precision, the question that Ifunanya had been sitting inside for 14 months without being able to articulate it that cleanly. The other two panelists were very still. The camera was on her. She had approximately 3 seconds before the pause became significant. She thought about the 43 seconds, about the 28 seconds on the subway, about Marie saying that's the most I've ever seen you be in public, about Ruby saying give them something else true, about the conversation with Minwoo in the early morning with Seoul coming up blue outside her window and him saying cowardice with good lighting. She thought about all of it in the space of 3 seconds, and then she stopped thinking and she spoke. "I feel responsible for it," she said. The room stayed quiet. Guilty. Responsible. She looked at the woman and then at the room. "Because I made that content. I made it consciously and with full creative control, and I made it because it was performing well, and because performing well felt like success, and because at 27 I had not yet learned the difference between being seen and being watched." She paused. "Being watched is passive. It happens to you. Being seen requires something from both sides." She looked at the camera, directly, the way she had stopped doing when she was making content with Minwoo, because looking directly at the camera made her feel exposed, and she had spent a year managing her exposure. "People who found me through that content found a version of me that was real in the way that performances are real. It happened. Those feelings happened. The relationship happened." Her voice was steady. "But I was making content about a life I was trying to love more than I actually loved it. And somewhere in the process of making that content for long enough, I started performing the love rather than questioning whether it was there." Silence. Complete silence. 40 people in a room with exposed brick and pendant lighting and not one of them moving. "And the answer to your question," Ifunanya said, "is that I feel responsible for every person who found me through that content and came to believe that what they were watching was the whole truth, because it wasn't. And I can't take it down because it happened, and pretending it didn't would be its own kind of lie." She paused. "What I can do is make sure that everything I make from here is the other kind. The kind where I'm not managing the distance between who I am and who I'm showing." She stopped. The room was still silent. And then the woman in the third row, the one who had asked the question, pressed both hands over her mouth, not in distress, in the specific gesture of someone who has just had a thing they did not have words for said out loud in front of them. And then someone in the back of the room began to clap, not the polite kind, the kind that starts from somewhere involuntary, and then the room catches it because the room recognizes what just happened and needs to respond to it physically, because words are not sufficient. The 40 chairs became 40 people standing. Ifunanya sat on the stage in the Sinchan creative space and looked at the room standing around her and felt something move through her that was entirely new in its specific combination of elements. Not the high of performance received well. Not the rush of numbers climbing on a screen. Something quieter and more permanent than both of those things. The feeling of having told the truth in public and having the public stand up for it. The other two panelists were on their feet. The moderator had stopped looking at her notes. The camera operator had stepped out from behind the camera. Ifunanya looked at her own hands in her lap. She thought with absolute clarity, I am never going back. Not to him. Not to the performance. Not to the version of herself that loved the life more than the living. Never. Ruby received the call on Thursday morning between sessions. An unknown number which she would normally decline, but something made her answer, and the voice on the other end was a man who introduced himself as the Korea Future Learning Initiative's expansion director, and who had a warm, professional manner, and who said he was calling to follow up on the proposal and to address any questions she might have. She stood in the empty classroom with the yellow walls and the reading rug and the bilingual library, and she listened to him describe the opportunity with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who had given this speech many times and believed in it genuinely, and who had no way of knowing that every sentence he was delivering was landing in the specific part of her that was not about opportunity. He talked about scale, about reach, about the children who would benefit from the methodology applied across 5 locations. He said her name would be on every piece of materials, which he offered as reassurance, and which landed as the opposite. He talked about the rebranding as a transitional process, a recalibration of visual identity to align with the institutional framework, which was the most elegant way she had ever heard someone describe painting over something that mattered. She let him finish. "Thank you," she said. "I'm still reviewing the proposal." "Of course," he said warmly. "Take the time you need." She hung up, stood in the classroom, looked at the wall for a long time, then she looked at the shelf. At the specific book on the 3rd shelf from the left that Sua had told her needed to be moved 3 weeks ago, because it was in the wrong order and Ruby had not moved it because she had been planning to reorganize the entire shelf and had not yet done it. The book sitting slightly out of alignment with everything around it. A small wrong thing in a room full of right things. She crossed the room and moved the book to its correct position, stood back, looked at the shelf. Thought about 60% ownership and navy blue and white walls, and her name on someone else's materials, and the difference between being used and being partnered, and the specific loneliness of a thing you built being recategorized as an asset. She thought about her grandmother's classroom. About the specific yellow that had taken 3 weeks to find. About a woman who had made a room that felt like permission, and how permission was the thing you could not replicate at scale without destroying the quality that made it permission in the first place. She knew the answer. She had known the answer since the first reading. She was not ready to say it yet because saying it would make it real, and making it real would mean closing a door, and she needed to sit with the closed door before she could walk away from it cleanly. Her phone buzzed. Jae-hoon. A message, not a call. "I heard something today from a professional contact. I want to talk to you about it. Not to push. Just because I think you might need to say something out loud to someone, and I want to be the someone if that's okay." She stared at the message, read it again. Felt something move through her that was complicated and warm and slightly destabilizing. He knew. She had not told him, and he knew, and he had not called her the moment he found out. Had not arrived at bridges with opinions or concern, or the specific weight of a person inserting themselves into a decision that was not theirs. Had simply sent a message that said, "I want to be the someone, if that's okay." She stood in the yellow classroom with her phone and the moved book and the proposal on her desk and felt, underneath the complexity of the decision she was carrying, the specific feeling of being known by someone who used the knowledge correctly. She typed back Friday, after pickup. "Stay." His reply came in less than a minute. "I'll stay." She put the phone in her pocket, looked at the yellow walls one more time, went to unlock the door for the afternoon session. Di-young was waiting, 8 minutes early. His Tuesday expression deployed on a Thursday because it was the only expression he had for academic environments. "Good morning," he said, in English, because it was Thursday and Thursday was English immersion day and Young did not make exceptions for emotional weather. "Good morning," Ruby said. "Shoes off, please." He removed his shoes and walked past her, and she locked the emotion in its labeled container, and followed him inside and taught the afternoon session with her full attention, because the children in her classroom deserved her full attention, and she was, regardless of everything else, a woman who gave the thing she was doing everything it required. That was the whole point of the yellow walls. That had always been the whole point. Friday pickup was different from all the others, not in anything visible. Jaehoon arrived at the standard time. Suah came out with her bag and her opinions, specifically that the Thursday group had rearranged the reading rug cushions incorrectly, and someone needed to address it before Tuesday, which Ruby noted with appropriate seriousness and resolved to address before Tuesday. Suah said goodbye in the format she had established, goodbye properly, and then looked between Ruby and her father with the assessing expression she deployed when she had identified a situation requiring management. "Are you having a grown-up conversation?" she asked. "Yes," Jaehoon said. "About something important." "Yes," she considered this. "Okay, I'll wait by the bookshelf." She pointed at the small shelf near the entrance that held the take-home reader collection. "I need to choose a book anyway." She went to the bookshelf with the focused purpose of someone who had graciously resolved a logistical problem and was now attending to other matters. Jaehoon looked at Ruby. Ruby looked at him. "Proposal," she said. "Yes." "How much do you know?" "Enough to understand why you haven't mentioned it." He held her gaze. "Not enough to know what you've decided." "Decided," she said. He waited. "I'm saying no." Classroom was quiet around them. The yellow walls in the late Friday light. The reading rug with its reorganized cushions, the bilingual library on its two shelves, the drawings on the walls that parents had brought in, every object in the room carrying the specific history of having been chosen by her, placed by her, part of something she had built from a one-room idea into the space she was currently standing in. "Okay," he said. "That's all. What else should I say? I don't know." People usually have more to say when someone turns down a significant financial opportunity. "I'm not people," he said simply, "and it's not my decision." She looked at him. "You called Joan." A pause. "Yes, Joan, because she loves you and she would know how to hold the information without using it." He held her gaze without apology. "I wasn't trying to manage your decision. He paused. "I needed to tell someone who loved you that you were carrying something heavy and I didn't know if you would let me carry any of it directly. You could have asked me." "I know." His voice was steady. "I should have asked you. I'm telling you now because you deserve to know." A beat. "I'm sorry." She looked at him for a long moment, at this man who had called her best friend because he did not know what to do with concern for her and had needed somewhere to put it, who had sent a message that said, "I want to be the someone if that's okay," who stayed when she asked him to stay and did not need the invitation to mean more than she was ready for it to mean. "The walls are staying yellow," she said. Something moved through his expression, the full smile assembling itself. "Good. The name is staying mine. Good. I'm going to need to find another way to expand because the waiting list is 11 people, and I'm not going to turn 11 children away from something they deserve access to because I couldn't figure out how to grow it correctly." He looked at her with an expression she had not seen before in exactly this combination. Something that was not quite pride because pride implied ownership and he did not own any of this. Something that recognized it, that witnessed it fully and correctly and gave it back to her without adding anything to it. "I know someone," he said, "a community development fund. They specialize in independent education initiatives, no rebranding requirements, no ownership transfer." He paused. "I've worked with them on 2 projects. They're the right kind of careful." She stared at him. "Been sitting on that," she said. 2 weeks, he admitted. "Since I heard about the proposal." "You did the research." "I did some preliminary reading." Jaehoon. "That is either the most thoughtful thing anyone has done for something I built or a significant overreach and I haven't decided which yet." He looked at her steadily. "Which way are you leaning?" She held his gaze for a long moment. "First one," she said quietly. "I'm leaning toward the first one." From the bookshelf without turning around, Suwa said, "I chose my book." "Good," Ruby and Jaehoon said simultaneously. Suwa turned and looked at them both with the expression of a 7-year-old who has correctly assessed a situation, found it satisfactory, and is prepared to move on. "Ready," she said. They walked out into the Friday Seoul afternoon, the three of them, and Ruby locked the door of Bridges behind her and stood for a moment on the step with the city moving around her and the yellow walls behind her, and the decision made and clean and entirely hers. She put the key in her pocket, walked with them toward the corner. The city held its February cold and its Friday energy, and its enormous continuous life, and Ruby walked through it feeling the specific lightness of a woman who has said no to the wrong thing and yes to the right one and knows, with the complete certainty of someone who has been paying attention, the difference between the two.
Hi loves. So before we close this video, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone that has supported this channel. Honestly, it's been a journey. Looking back at where we started and where we are right now, it's been amazing doing this with you guys, and I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone that has liked, subscribed, and commented on my posts, on my videos. You guys mean so much to me. You guys are the life of this channel. Thank you so much. And this is where this part ends. If you guys like it, just comment part 4, and yeah, we'll definitely work on it. See you on the next one, and have a lovely week.